The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name's Stuart Rogers. I'm your VentureBeat MC for today, and welcome to the Future of Work Summit, brought to you, of course, by VentureBeat. We're super excited to have over 900 of you pre-registered joining from across the world, so thank you very much. And of course, there are thousands more tuning into the VentureBeat live stream across Twitch, Facebook, VentureBeat's editorial stream, and YouTube. Of course, we couldn't do this without our wonderful sponsors. That's why we're here. We would very much like to thank the Future of Work Summit sponsors, Aurea Software, MoveWorks, and PwC. Thank you so much for supporting this event. And please do be sure to visit the sponsor profiles to get access to content and schedule an appointment with these companies. You can do that right on the portal. Of course, the official hashtag is VBTransform, hashtag VBTransform. My very good friend, Chris Messina, he was the person that actually invented the hashtag. First of all, Twitter really didn't know what to do with it. Now we all do. So let's honor Mr. Messina by joining in the conversation, using the hashtag everywhere that you can use it. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, even TikTok. So please use that Twitter feed. Please use hashtag VBTransform in your tweets today. That will alert us. We'll get to see what you're talking about. We can maybe join in the conversation with you there. If you'd like to meet other Future of Work attendees, make sure you visit the networking zone below. Click the access link below to get access. And the first 30 people to access that networking area who type in the chat, "I need coffee," remember that, "I need coffee," we'll receive a $10 e-gift card for Starbucks. So we'll get you that caffeine injection. We all understand that whilst attending this virtual event, you might be getting on with your day job. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any sessions today, click the red bell you should see down in the bottom left of your screen, and you'll receive notifications on what sessions are coming up next. So today we are going to delve into the hot topic that is the future of work. We've got a great program with over 10 amazing speakers, some incredible content coming up for you today. And of course, this event is interactive. You can ask questions to the speakers and answer some of our intriguing poll questions in Slido. And we've got a lot to share with you. And we're using a few different tools to help you connect with your amazing fellow attendees and the solution providers so you can get the most out of the event. There's a how-to video that you can access below the networking links down there, or you can contact eventsupport@venturebeat.com for help. So, without further ado, we're excited to kick off the Future of Work Summit today by welcoming Tom Davenport, visiting professor from the University of Oxford. Professor Davenport will chat with Deloitte's Susan Cantrell about how to step back and look at the big picture and understand the various implications of the future of work that is driven by advanced automation, communication, and collaboration technologies. And don't forget that anytime you have a question for our speakers, you can add that question to the Slido on the event portal to the right of the main stage. Speakers will answer audience questions in our live Q&A segment following each session. So, as I say, without further ado, please welcome Tom and Susan.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Cantrell, Vice President of Products, Workforce Strategies at Deloitte, and I am thrilled to be here today with none other than Tom Davenport. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Sue. Happy to be here with you.
Tom, I know you've been doing a lot of research around AI and you're even writing a book about it. And I'm wondering if you could start with just telling us a little bit about yourself, what you've been pursuing and studying over the course of your career, and a little bit about your book and current research.
Sure, happy to. A very short version of my career, since that could easily take up our entire time. I'm currently a visiting professor at Oxford Said Business School, regularly a professor at Babson College in the Boston area. I also do some work with Deloitte as a senior advisor to the AI practice, and I'm also a fellow of the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy. And what I've been working on for the past couple of years is a book involving how people work with AI on a day-to-day basis. It's about, people who are AI collaborators, so to speak. And we have 29 case studies of people who are in that role and all different types of jobs. And then at the end of the book, we sort of talk about what does it mean for the technologies they use and how it affects their jobs, and how do you make it more effective.
Thanks so much, Tom. It's a gold mine of information, so many case studies. So as you perform this research, can you talk a little bit about which applications of AI and automation maybe had the largest impact on the future of work, and ones that will influence future of work the most?
Well, yeah. So in almost every case, there were multiple types of AI being used. A fair number of people still using rule engines in one way or another. A lot of people think that technology is obsolete, but apparently it's not, because it's still being pretty widely used. But they're supplementing it in many cases with machine learning. So, for example, we looked at a anti-money laundering application at DBS Bank in Singapore, and most banks use rules for that, but it doesn't really work terribly well in that it creates way too many false positives. So sometimes 95% false positives. So what DBS has done, and a couple of other banks have done this too, is they've added machine learning to kind of prioritize the suspicious activity alerts, so they can see which ones they really need to investigate and which ones they don't. So, and I think machine learning, of course, is the most popular AI technology, probably the one that has the most impact on the future of work. We saw it in financial services. We saw it in agriculture, to identify weeds in a field for a machine to chop them out. We saw it in fundraising. I mean, just about every case we looked at had machine learning as at least one of the components, and in several cases, deep learning as well, the more complex form of machine learning.
So that's great. Machine learning obviously depends a lot on data, and good data. Can you talk a bit about the underlying data infrastructure layer, maybe at DBS Bank or some of the other organizations that you've studied, and how organizations are successfully managing their data to successfully implement and transform with machine learning?
Sure. Well, in almost every case, there was a platform underlying the AI system. AI sort of doesn't work by itself. And in many cases, one of the key functions of the platform was to deliver data to and from the AI system. And at the bank, for example, they're able to examine far more data than they could previously, something like 90% of the data, as opposed to 20 or 30% in the past. And of course, for machine learning, at least supervised machine learning, by far the most common type, you have to have a labeled training data set. So in a lot of cases, that was not that easy to assemble for organizations to train their models. But once they did, the models generally performed quite well. And we didn't see a lot of cases where because of drift or something like that, the models stopped doing a good job of predicting. They were quite persistent in their effectiveness.
Great. I'm wondering if you can switch gears a bit, because there's been a lot of talk over the last 5 or 6 years about automation taking over jobs. And I was wondering if you have a perspective, if you've seen throughout the course of your research, is this really happening? Why or why not?
Well, we didn't see any of that in the cases that we looked at. We saw some automation-oriented technologies. We wrote one case on Dentsu, the big global advertising agency, and they were trying to create a cadre of citizen automation developers to develop small automations. They also had a kind of a large automation group. But in neither that case nor any other ones did we see large-scale job loss. We saw people working with AI, but we didn't see AI working on its own. And I think that's partly a function of the fact that the AI isn't necessarily, trustworthy enough to make all the decisions by itself. It needs a kind of a check or an audit. And we saw that in a number of cases. Sometimes it breaks down. In the case of the weeding machine, apparently there are a fair number of malfunctions. So a guy has to walk behind it and with a tablet and sort of figure out what's going on and get help to fix it when it goes down. So in some cases the AI just wasn't really astute enough to understand the whole situation, didn't know enough of the context. So in the case of a university fundraiser, it would write emails to the people it thought were had the best probability of giving money, but then the fundraiser could override and say, "Oh, it was great that we went to that fantastic restaurant in Little Rock. This was in Arkansas. The last time I visited you," which the AI system wouldn't know about. Or Morgan Stanley, we looked at a next best action system that was great at recommending stock and bond investments, but not as good at sort of understanding the life events that a client might be going through.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about weeders, we talked about fundraisers, the bankers. They're all kind of collaborating with AI in the course of their jobs, maybe changing their roles. There's been a lot of talk about kind of AI, human and machine collaboration. So what does it really mean underneath the covers? How does it impact people's roles? Can you give some examples? And what are the primary ways jobs are being changed rather than replaced as a result of working with AI?
Yeah, well, it's slightly different in every case, but there are some generalities. I mean, one is that in a way, the job, the kind of decision making and thinking aspects of the job often get a little harder because AI is doing the easy part, and it leaves the hard parts for the human being to assess. We saw that in the case of a digital underwriter working for a company called Haven Life. It's a unit of Mass Mutual, where the underwriting decisions are harder because all the automated parts are already done, and so the more complex things that the human underwriter has to deal with. In some cases, the human is just sort of checking what the AI system has done. We had a medical coding example there where, there are all these codes, the ICD-11 codes, tens of thousands of codes that nobody can really remember. So the AI system kind of reads the clinical notes and recommends a code. And the human coder looks at it and says, well, that seems fine, or no, that doesn't make a lot of sense. She said that it can make some coders lazy and they probably just check off a little bit too easily. But to really, pay attention and make sure it's the right code takes a fair amount of effort. In general, I think we had some concerns for Steve Miller at Singapore Management University was my co-author on this work. And we had some concerns about the entry level people, because again, if
Right.
AI is doing the things that the entry level workers typically did, that leaves a need for more experienced workers. But how do you get to be an experienced worker if you haven't gone through the entry level? So nobody seems to
Mhm.
have figured that one out yet. But I do worry a little bit about the people in that category.
Yeah,
And of
right.
course, it changes the nature of work day to day. Some said they felt a little kind of chained to their laptop all day long, but it did make them more efficient and effective. Um, a lot of solo work for the most
Mhm.
part. So maybe
Mhm.
you have to work hard to get the social interaction you need with other humans in these environments.
Right. So are you seeing, it's a really good point. Are you seeing organizations maybe cross functionally with HR getting involved in addition to IT to kind of help support workers in new ways who are now collaborating with AI as almost a digital colleague? Are they conscious that this might take some new norms and practices?
Well, I'd love to say yes, but we didn't see too many examples
Mm,
of HR jumping in and saying, "Hey, this isn't healthy for somebody to spend all day long, you
mhm,
know, working with a computer." There were certainly some cases where, for example, in the case of the digital life underwriter, she would talk with the members of the team that developed the application once a week and try to help refine it over time and so
mm.
on. And I think it was a valued part of her job. But in general, I think AI has yet to really intervene and say, here's how we make these jobs more effective. And I think, you know,
Yep.
combined with COVID, I think the advent of AI and jobs is going to create a really important set of activities for HR people. They need to get moving on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So maybe we're just at the beginning phases of that. Yep. So,
Have you seen
Tom,
the
I'm,
same thing? I know you look at some of these same issues. Have you seen a lot of
yes,
HR organizations jumping in?
I wish I did, but
Yeah.
sadly, no. I think many of them are aware that they need to, but I don't think there's been a lot of action yet. Because when you think about it, they're really almost becoming, some of your examples you gave, almost a digital colleague where we're interacting with them. And we do a lot of work in the HR field around helping people team with other people. But what happens when AI joins the team? Or you're working, pretty much back and forth with AI all day. How do we create those more productive, satisfying relationships with the technology we're
Right.
working with?
Yeah, I mean, people talk about the digital workforce, and I ran into the other day someone was manager of the digital workforce, but the digital workforce rarely works by itself. So we need to
Right.
figure out how to collaborate with each other.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, what about communication and collaboration technologies? Did you explore those in your book? Are you seeing any new advances in technology to enable at least people to collaborate better?
Well, I mean, a lot of the jobs that we looked at involved communication with clients or potential donors and fundraising, or with people doing insurance policy applications, and I guess with potential bad actors in anti money laundering. So yeah, most of these systems had some communication component. I thought the Morgan Stanley one was quite interesting. They basically said, we developed an AI system to recommend stocks and bond investments and investing strategies to customers, but it turns out that success in the financial advisor role there is really mostly due to making clients think that you're checking in on them and that you're interested in
Mm,
what they're up to and that you're thinking about them. So the communications component is at least as important as the ideas, the financial ideas component. And the communications component caused people to call in and say, I want to pursue this further sometimes, or tell me more about that idea. But it had to be coming from a human. Same with a fundraiser or we would just delete it like all the other automated
Did
emails we get.
technology help? How did technology help in those examples? Was there something that technology could help before the human came in for the communication?
Well, in some cases, but in a lot of cases, it would compose a message and, in an way, save the financial advisor or the fundraiser or the underwriter, or whatever, a lot of time. But still, you have to put in that personal touch. And I loved at Morgan Stanley when asked what addition would the financial advisors most like for the next best action system, they said, tell me about things happening in the client's local sports team so I can put that into the message. They have not chosen to add that yet, but I thought it was a really interesting request.
That they can kind of create this personalized template that then the human would even personalize further, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How
so
about
it's making
those
some.
nails?
I've been interested personally that, AI can also be used for surveillance. And I know you have a case around surveilling in banks against bad actors, right? To prevent things like money laundering and the like. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that. And then if you have any examples of, or are you seeing this happen in terms of the workforce? AI being used to keep tabs on workers. We're all working from home in the last year and a half due to the pandemic, and we are now having this digital workplace, which makes it possible, I guess, for the first time. Are you seeing that at all? If you are, do you have any recommendations on how organizations should handle it?
I think it's certainly fair to say that organizations can measure and surveil their employees much more. We had one case study about a relatively small mortgage bank in the Boston area, and they were very efficient. They used AI, they used robotic process automation, but they also had these measurements available all the time to team members about, this person is, 22 minutes behind schedule and so on. And
wow.
Head of operations came to my class a couple of times and talked about it with my students. And they said, isn't that kind of invasive? And he said, well, maybe, but people don't seem to mind it much. We celebrate their achievements. If they're falling behind, we don't just fire them. We try to figure out what's going on or give them some new skills.
They're using it as almost an improvement mechanism. They're not punishing people over it in a way.
When I interviewed people in that organization, they really did not seem to mind it much, and they seemed to think it was a great place to work. So I don't think people mind their performance being monitored as long as it's being done in an effective way, managerially. Particularly, if their compensation involves some of how they're doing.
Right, and then they can pick up the good aspects and actually have an upside to it. Very interesting point.
It may get worse, and as you say, we've been doing a lot more of this in COVID, and I'm thinking that there's some organizations doing it in a very ham-handed way. But in general, I didn't find too much of a problem in our case studies.
Yeah, it's all on the way you implement it and handle it managerially. I think you're right. Well, with that note, I think we're at time, and I wanted to thank you very much, Tom, for an interesting discussion. And we look forward to your new book.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We will now move into the live Q&A portion of this webinar, and wanted to open up to all of our participants, and we have a couple questions coming in, and I'll kick us off, Tom, with the first question.
Great.
As AI becomes more advanced, how much government regulation do you think is appropriate, and how will corporations have to give up their confidential or private information?
Well, that's a big topic, but I would say, in some cases we need less government intervention, like in China, and in other cases we need more government intervention, like in the U.S. Basically, in the U.S., I think we have little to no government intervention. and we are, there's starting to be some committees that are talking about the issue and so on, but really no regulation or legislation about it. And I think it is important to protect people's rights and not let you take their data without compensating them for it, et cetera. Yeah, I think Europe is ahead of both the US and China in that regard. It has some legislation, it's proposed some other legislation, and maybe the thing to do is just to follow Europe. I doubt that will happen in the US or China, but that would be a smart strategy.
Yeah, certainly legislation and regulations certainly always lag. The next question is very similar to the first question, which is privacy is becoming a big issue, right? And rightly so. Should the world adopt common data privacy and AI standards? Are there any other cures you can suggest? Tom, are companies coming together in consortia to develop guidelines, for example, while they're kind of waiting for legislation to catch up?
Yeah, I was just writing about this, Sue, and there are a number of consortia that organizations have to address this issue. Deloitte is involved in one called the Data and Trust Alliance, which is just getting going, and its primary focus has been on workforce-related issues. I just received this morning a document that I had helped to create for the World Economic Forum on guidelines for companies on how to deal with AI. There are probably 7 or 8 different consortia that organizations have. But I think the hard part is not sort of drafting the policy, it's really enforcing it and integrating it with the rest of your business processes. I was writing recently about how Unilever was trying to do that, and they're making a very good faith effort, but it's a very diverse, decentralized company and really hard to police what everybody in the organization is doing with regard to AI.
Really good point. It's the action and the enforcement. Yep. Another question here. Are you seeing any changes due to Web 3.0, blockchain, gig economy, or related technologies that are going to impact the workplace of the future? Kind of what's next, Tom, do you think?
Well, maybe you're better equipped to answer that question. I'm the AI person. I haven't seen much happening related to Web 3.0, blockchain, not really applied all that much that I see yet to workforce-related issues. Obviously, the gig economy is a much bigger issue, and I think smart organizations are trying to not treat it as a binary thing. Oh, we have employees, or we hire people for gigs, but really to combine the two and maybe supplement a little bit of the people lost through the Great Resignation, which we were just talking about. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yep. I think blockchain, you're right, hasn't taken off in the workforce, but there's certainly applications. Can we create almost skills passports for workers, put verified skills on the blockchain that makes it portable for workers to be able to share their credentials with other employers more quickly, easily, in a verified way.
Are you suggesting that all of the skill and credential information in LinkedIn is not entirely accurate, Sue?
How'd you know? Yes, the key is verified. Exactly. So that's I haven't seen a lot of it take off, but it's certainly something that could impact it. Let's go to some next set of questions. Let's see here. As a follow-up to your reference to the new Data and Trust Alliance, which you just spoke about, what do you see as responsible practices in detecting and removing bias in AI specifically?
Well, that's also a big issue. I think we have some sort of tactics to address the issue. There are a lot of people saying that they're worried about bias and they're going to try to do something about it or eliminate it, but it's hard to do because in some ways AI, when it involves people, is really about the idea of treating different people differently, whether you're talking about the customer or the workforce. And Sue is the author of The Workforce of One, which basically says you should treat everybody in your workforce differently. And that, if you're not really, really careful, can result in forms of bias. So it's really hard to identify bias without looking at the output of a model. In many cases, we can't even understand what the model is doing. So we have to look at the output and see, did it result in bias? There are, as I say, a few tactics like model cards, this idea that originated at Google and now is spreading to some other companies, where you at least kind of document your efforts to try to reduce bias and try to say, how the model works and so on. So it's sort of a documentation-oriented approach. But, a lot of people talk about it. Not that many people have done much with it. And the other thing to remember is that human decision-making is full of bias. You look at the Wikipedia entry for cognitive bias, there are about 200 different types of cognitive bias that we humans engage in. So, AI doesn't have to do much to be better than what humans do.
That's for sure. Maybe making decisions based on facts and data could help improve.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we'll hope to see you again.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was a fantastic session, and some great questions there from our audience. In fact, a lot of great questions from our audience. Thank you for being so engaged. Keep them coming with every session. You've got that Q&A link down there. It will take you to Slido. So thanks very much, Tom and Susan. Next, please welcome Bhavin Shah, CEO of MoveWorks, who will share how companies like Palo Alto Networks use AI to keep their people productive from anywhere.
2 years ago, the business world changed forever. Most of us were asked to work from home, and many of our products and services were rendered obsolete overnight. Most companies faced a crisis. One of those companies was Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks is one of the leading cybersecurity companies in the world. Of the Fortune 100, 85 of them rely on Palo Alto Networks tools and technologies to stay safe. Now, the team at Palo Alto Networks knew that in order to provide the same level of support that they were providing their employees in the office remotely, they had to rethink their business processes and support structure. They envisioned a bold new world, which they call flex work, in conjunction with Box, Uber, Splunk, and Zoom. And the idea behind flex work was to enable employees to work from anywhere at any time to do their best work. But it doesn't just take policy to affect change. It takes technology. And so the team at Palo Alto Networks came to us and said, could we use conversational AI to provide a new digital hub, a place where employees could get the same quality support they were getting in person, remotely? And so we responded with Sheldon. Sheldon is a conversational AI chatbot that is used by the employees at Palo Alto Networks to get IT help, HR help, and the likes. Now, Sheldon was deployed at Palo Alto Networks at the peak of the first wave of the pandemic in April of 2020. And it took just a few weeks. If you talk to the team at Palo Alto Networks, they'll tell you that the hardest part of setting Sheldon up was actually just picking the name. The results have been staggering. Over the last several years, over 90% of employees now use Sheldon on a regular basis. Over 4,000 issues are solved by Sheldon completely autonomously, end-to-end, saving Palo Alto Networks over 180,000 hours of productivity. For simple requests, like needing access to an application, maybe wanting to find out a travel policy, or some new information, all that can be done through a simple interface with Sheldon. Now, this is a chart of Palo Alto Networks stock. Sheldon was launched, as I mentioned, in April of 2020, and the stock has risen dramatically since then, over 252%. Now, I'd like to say that Sheldon had a lot to do with this, but my stockbroker will tell you it probably had more to do with solar winds and other world events than our tool. But what does he know? The fact of the matter is, the team at Palo Alto Networks recognized that by investing in employee experience and productivity, they were going to drive bigger and better business outcomes. Now, it's no surprise that Newsweek labeled Palo Alto Networks as one of the most loved places to work in America during this time. Now, the premise of my talk is that you too can transform your organization just like Palo Alto Networks did by using conversational AI. Now, the role of the CIO is changing. Gone are the days where simply providing Wi-Fi access and 5 nines of uptime on the core infrastructure and making sure the house is secure is all that's required. Today, the most important job of a CIO and IT team is to ensure that employees have a seamless experience. Employees should be able to get the help that they need when they need it quickly so they can focus on the most important work that they need to do. But the Great Resignation is real. Gallup tells us that 48% of our employees are looking for new jobs. And that result is causing companies to lose millions of dollars as employees turn over and change positions. So the opportunity to provide a better experience, to make employees feel more connected to your company is more relevant than ever today. But being a hybrid employee is tough. There's hundreds of applications that you have to be familiar with, different interfaces, different rules, different access points. It's difficult for employees to feel like they can focus on the important work when they're getting tripped up and stuck throughout their day on the simple friction points that exist between these applications, in these applications, and in these tools. And so it's an important role that we all have as leaders, as IT, from IT to HR to facilities to other groups, to be able to make these friction points go away, to make the small things and the large things simplified for employees to get the help that they need. Now, there is help that's coming. There's 3 secular shifts that are occurring that's leading the way to produce a brand new era of conversational AI. The first is SaaS integrations. We've seen over the last decade the growth of new tools and capabilities, but now those tools can be integrated more effectively and more efficiently. Lots of different automation platforms and toolkits are out there to provide data streams and seamless integration. You combine that with the explosion of enterprise-wide collaboration tools and messaging platforms like Slack and Teams. And what you'll find is that employees are not using email as much anymore, and they're going to these tools to collaborate, to coordinate, and to get the help and the information that they need. And last but not least, natural language understanding, NLU, is going through a renaissance right now. The types of machine learning models and techniques, from deep learning to statistical techniques, are exploding, giving us a deep understanding of what people mean when they use words to describe their needs. All 3 of these are lending themselves to the new era of conversational AI. Now, as I've talked about, the future is conversational. We believe that employees should just be able to describe what they need and in seconds get the support right away. But there's a challenge, because if you've ever used a chatbot, you've probably been underwhelmed. Here's a famous travel chatbot that I used the other day, and I asked it a simple question. I wanted to fly to Boston. And I wasn't quite paying attention. I was doing 6 things at the time, and I said, what's the best price? Unfortunately, the bot took that literally and said, okay, looking for flights from Price, Utah to Boston, Massachusetts. Where do you want to fly out? Now, I'm too embarrassed to show you the rest of this because it evolves pretty quickly. But the point being is this. These tools that have come before have not met the needs of our employees, and there's a simple reason for that. These tools are all hard-coded with logic flows and systems that require the user to follow the flow of the designer. If this, then that, with fixed dates, with certain expectations for keywords. And when that doesn't happen, there's exceptions that have to be created. And this code becomes very unmanageable and actually doesn't deliver the true experience. And if it's difficult to build, think about the experience for the employee. It's very difficult and frustrating to use. But there is a better way. And using machine learning, using new techniques, using ensembles of techniques, from spell corrector models, statistical grammar models, intent models, entity extraction models, you can actually, instead of predetermining the conversation, you can react to the conversation as it emerges with the employee. Here's an example. Hey IT, Jenny Marshall just joined our team. How do I add her to the UI roadmap DL ASAP? Thanks. There's a lot of words in there. There's a lot of complexity in there. You try and throw that into a search engine, you're not going to get a good result. But through conversational AI, you can take that in one shot, turn around, confirming all the facts that were mentioned, and giving the user, the added person, to the distribution list in just a few seconds. Now, I want to talk about 5 different organizations and their journey of mastering hybrid work using conversational AI. I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of large enterprises all over the world, and they've each shown us new ways and techniques of leveraging this new technology of conversational AI to best support their hybrid employees and their remote employees. And these are 5 examples of some of the best teams I've had the pleasure of working with. These teams have applied new techniques, have overcome universal challenges that you're probably facing in your environment, that will give insight into how this all comes together to support your remote employees. Now, employees need a single interface for support. This sounds simple. This sounds obvious. But what's difficult is that in any large enterprise, there isn't just one knowledge database. There isn't just one place to go to look up information. There's many systems. And that situation isn't more felt than at Hearst. Hearst Media is a 130-year-old company that owns some of the most beloved brands that we probably all interact with on a weekly basis. But Hearst is also a collection of over 360 different organizations that have come together over the years. Now, their chatbot, Herbie, was there to help employees navigate this field of resources and support tools. Mahendra Durai, their CIO, came to us and said, hey, while news travels at the speed of light these days, it's not as easy for our employees to navigate all these various systems, especially now that they're working remotely. They don't work in an office anymore where we can all help one another out. They're relying on our tools, in this case on Herbie, to get access to these systems. And so we started to investigate what all these possibilities were. And there were so many different types of questions and needs, from forms that needed to get filled out, to knowledge that needed to be surfaced, to different maps that needed to be brought forward. And so what ended up being developed was what we call the MoveWorks Enterprise Cache. And it reads all these resources on a real-time basis every 4 hours, enabling us to provide the real-time answers to employees through Herbie whenever it comes up. And as these resources are added, Herbie's adding them to its repertoire, all making them conversational and bite-sized so they work in this very new messaging platform and collaboration tool that everyone is now using, Slack and Teams and others. Now, the result has been staggering. Employees are using Herbie at an increasing rate week over week, and it's answering hundreds and thousands of questions for their team, resulting in less work for the IT and HR departments and more productivity for the employees. Now, you can't support a global company with English-only AI. The truth is that as we scale and as we grow our organizations, we need to make English not just the only language in which we support, but other languages. Other languages should be first-class citizens. Employees needing help shouldn't stumble because they speak a different language. And that isn't more felt at a place like Albemarle. Albemarle is a large chemical processing company you probably haven't heard of, but they produce much of the lithium that's probably in your mobile phone right now. And their bot, Albot, was providing support in English. But Patrick Thompson, their CIO, came to us and said, we have a global workforce that's growing. We have employees all over the world, and I've been hiring bilingual, trilingual, multilingual agents to support these employees, and it's difficult, it's costly. These agents turn over, it's difficult to recruit and find people who want to take on this role. Can Albot provide the same quality of language understanding as you're doing in English? Now, we love this challenge, but it's a difficult one because to truly support foreign languages, other languages, in conversational AI, you have to start from the ground up and build new machine learning models and techniques and annotate data to be able to effectively understand the nuances that occur in those languages. But the challenge is a challenge of small data. You simply probably won't have the same number of examples and use cases in German, Portuguese, Spanish, and other foreign languages as you may in English. And so the way to overcome that we discovered is a technique called collective learning. We're able to tokenize, we're able to abstract all of these different sentences that are spoken no matter what language they're in. And from there, we can take that idea and permute all of these different examples into millions of use cases that we can use to train our machine learning models, making them more robust, making them more precise. The result has been great. Albemarle stock is up over 150%, but more importantly, their employees have gone back to Patrick and said, we feel like a first-class citizen now because this bot truly understands what we want and we can speak in our native tongue. Now, companies thrive in a hybrid environment where employees can help each other, when they don't have to simply rely on one source to get help. And the team at Unity, a 3D authoring platform that powers many of the video games and movies that we all watch and enjoy, needed to support their employees as they were all going to this new hybrid world. Now, Brian Hoyt, their CIO, came to us and said, hey, since the start of the pandemic, we've seen a 2x increase in ticket volume and employees needing help and asking questions of IT and HR. How do we use Ninja Unicorn, our chatbot, to enable a greater collaboration amongst employees? And so they had this idea of creating an open channel called Ask IT, where employees could ask questions and others can answer, perhaps IT could answer, but also Ninja Unicorn could answer. And so in this case, Alex is asking about Lucid Chart, access to some diagrams, and Ninja Unicorn responds in a thread saying, hey, I think you're asking about software provision. I can go ahead and get that for you. Click here to go to a direct message. After completing that conversation, Ninja Unicorn comes back and confirms that Alex now has access to Lucid Chart, putting a check mark, allowing IT to know this task is now completed. This issue is now resolved. This is powerful, but it allows IT to really open up the conversation from just being about an employee submitting a ticket to employees helping one another, to conversational AI jumping in when appropriate, and only responding to those issues that it can help with. You don't want to create more noise in an environment like this, do you? You don't want the chatbot to answer every question, even with bad answers. You only want it to provide good results and good responses. Support issues happen when change management fails. As we all know, when people don't know the policy or the procedure or that something has changed, they have to file a ticket. Something's gone wrong. And that increases the workload and the demand for support teams. Now, at Verisk, one of the leading data analytics companies, they face this challenge. David Lewis, their CIO and head of IT, came to us and said, hey, can we use Vic, our conversational AI chatbot, to support both communications and support in a single interface? And the reason for this was the following. They were seeing very low engagement and adoption with their employee communications. These no-reply emails would go out, and only 10% of employees would open them or engage with them. But he knew that employees love Vic, and Vic had a very high engagement rate. What if we were to combine those channels? And so we did just that. We created a comms tool that allows Vic to broadcast updates, communicate to employees about changes, therefore preventing the kinds of ticket volumes that would normally come in when people got confused or surprised. Here's an example inside of Microsoft Teams. Vic reaches out to Jenny and perhaps other employees that are working in the New York office, indicating that the office will be closed in October and that Jenny needed to work from home. Now, instead of that just being a one-way message, Jenny can actually respond to this, saying, "Got it, can I please get a new monitor for my home in that case?" And Vic can actually respond and give Jenny the proper guidance, in this case, a form that she needs to fill out in order to request a new monitor. All seamless, not waiting days for that ticket to get responded to or that information to get passed along. Now, to really unlock the full potential of automation, you need to personalize. And that was evident as we were deploying and building out Sheldon with the team at Palo Alto Networks. To really fulfill the promise of flex work, Sheldon needed to provide these employees around the world with more personalized responses so they felt like they were getting the same high quality support that they would get when they were in the office. And for new employees who only started remotely, well, they deserve the kind of personalization and support that was indicative of their culture that they had joined. And so the team at Palo Alto Networks came to us and said, "Hey, can we personalize the responses of Sheldon based on the person's location in our organization, since we have employees worldwide? And furthermore, for employees who aren't yet active on our new collaboration tool like Slack, can we provide Sheldon to them on the web?" And so we followed suit with that and pursued the idea of making this content personalized. And the result is the following. Here's an employee in the US, Lewis, asking about travel guidelines. And there's a policy document that gets brought up based on his location being in the US. But Alex York is based in the UK. And so his policy travel guidelines are different, which then gets surfaced. But for Chelsea, who isn't even starting the conversation over chat, she actually starts it over an email, asking about going to an in-person conference and what the policy will be around that. And the bot, Sheldon, responds after detecting her email and finds her inside of the collaboration tool and gives her the information that she's looking for. Now, for users that aren't active, again, on Slack or Teams or your core collaboration tools, in this case, an employee from the UK is able to access Sheldon on their portal that they have internally, making it easy and seamless and ubiquitous to get the help that they're looking for. It's time to reimagine your digital workplace, and I've talked about 5 different companies and their journey of using conversational AI to make hybrid work more effective, to make it easier, to make employees feel more connected to their organizations, to be able to do more meaningful work. The team at Unity wanted to bring back the idea of crowdsourcing and employees helping one another. And so by using Ninja Unicorn in a channel, they were able to amplify that. The team at Albemarle was really able to bring a first-class experience to all employees, not letting language ever slow them down or to change the experience. The team at Hearst was able to aggregate thousands of resources into one single interface through Herbie, making it simple and easy for employees to get what they needed. At Verisk, they took the idea of combining employee communications and support into a single interface that employees would pay attention to and engage with. And last but not least, Palo Alto Networks used Sheldon to create and deliver on their promise of flex work, to make it a reality through personalization and through support. These are all companies that didn't accept the status quo. They wanted to challenge what was possible, and they used conversational AI. My question to you, is it time for you to do the same?
Well, Bhavin, thank you so much for an incredible presentation. We got to learn a bit more about your company and obviously the solutions you provide. So some questions, of course, have came through from the audience. I wanted to start with this one. So you mentioned that MoveWorks uses machine learning to understand employees' requests. Is that machine learning based on just the tickets you see at for each customer? Or in other words, is MoveWorks starting from zero every time?
Great question. And thanks again for having me, Haley, and the team here at VentureBeat. Absolutely not. So, what we know is what employees mean when they reveal their requests, when they have a question that they want to ask. And so to do that, we've been able to leverage tickets and understanding and learnings across the globe. So every company that's on our platform benefits from the collective learning that we do across the different customers. Because if you think about it, language is very similar across organizations. So even if you're in an industrial organization versus a media company, if someone says, "Hey, I'm really sorry, I just ran over my laptop. Am I in trouble? Can you help?" That's common language that we can come to the table understanding. You don't have to pre-program that. And that's one of the biggest challenges that's facing companies themselves trying to build conversational AI. There's not enough data. There's not enough use cases. There's not enough utterances, as we refer to them, that they can use to train these machine learning models, which require hundreds, thousands, millions of examples to be able to have the kind of robustness and precision that we look for. And so I think, when we look at success and when we look at the offering that we want to provide is the ability to have impact in the first minute, in the first hour. Many AI projects are slow to actually create impact because of what you're describing, where everything has to be built using a professional services motion on, situational based on what the use cases are for that company. Instead, we took a global view and said, why don't we bring all this to the table? And why don't we keep improving upon that in a safe manner? So we work with obviously large security companies and financial institutions, allowing us to train global models as well as to preserve privacy with individual sort of company-based models.
Great. No, that's a great answer, especially when you've ran over your laptop with your car, right? That was a good example. Another questions came through. Of course, we've got a few here, and we've got time to cover hopefully all of them. So someone's asked, my team has been looking at other bot toolkits and solutions that claim to have similar features. How do you recommend someone evaluate these available solutions to make the right decision?
Yeah, the number one criteria you should use is adoption and engagement. I think for the last, call it 7 to 8 years, there's been a lot of hype and promise around using conversational AI. But I like to say companies deployed them and employees ignored them for the large majority of organizations out there. And that's where you have to spend more time, not just evaluating features and functions, but you have to look at, is the product getting used? Do employees engage with it? Call those employees at that company. Do you use this bot? Now, in our case, it's not called MoveWorks. It's called DigiBot at Western Digital. It's called HelpBot at Slack. It's called Hero at DocuSign, as I mentioned in the presentation. So I think that despite the reputation that's out there, which oftentimes isn't great for chatbots, what you have to really look for is a solution that has been able to transcend that is seeing increased adoption over time, not just at launch. There's a phenomenon where people engage with chatbots right away, and then there's a drop-off. And you actually want to measure and track and see reports about first-time visit rates, second-time visit rates, third time, and so on. And if you can find that, if you're seeing that in a solution, then that's where you should head, because that's the goal, that's the objective, which is to create more impact.
Great. No, that's really interesting insight there, especially in the drop-off. That must be something that you have to overcome, and your clients have to overcome as well. So talking about, implementing it, how long does it take one of your customers to go live? That was another question. And to follow up on that, how much effort is required?
Sure. Well, the short answer is not long and very little. We have been building a lot of components that understand and connect very easily to the common enterprise systems that are out there. So various ticketing systems, identity access management systems, chat systems, knowledge databases, automation tools, forms, etc., workflows. And that makes it very quick and easy to get our system up and running. Typically, it's 4 to 8 weeks, and it takes about 30 hours of our customers' time to give us access to the various systems, to set up rules and various things that may not exist. But a lot of it has been engineered to be quite automatic. We're going to read knowledge from your system. We're going to index that through the enterprise cache, which I talked about with Hearst. We're going to understand various named entities in your environment. You may have a system called CRX, but we need to know that. So when someone types CTX, we know it's a misspelling of that. All that's done programmatically. It's not done through a one-off kind of activity with engineers. It's all automated.
Great. Well, we're up against time. Thank you so much, Bhavin. This was a great conversation, and thank you for your support and your participation.
Awesome. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much to Bhavin for such a great presentation, and to our very own Haley for some awesome questioning, and to you, of course, for the awesome questions in the first place. Next, please welcome Brendan Idelson, CTO of Zoom. Brendan will chat with VentureBeat's Shuchi Rana to discuss how Zoom is reimagining the future of work, the data and AI technologies they're developing, the challenges they're facing, and the lessons they are learning along the way. Take it away, Brendan and Shuchi.
Hello, I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest, Brendan Idelson, CTO of Zoom, a company that has become a household name and probably one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Welcome to the Future of the Work Summit, Brendan. Great to have you.
It's wonderful to be here today.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and role at Zoom, and what it was like to have experienced the growth that Zoom did in a very brief period of time? And as someone who had to make sure things were running, I'm sure it was no easy feat. So if you can speak to scaling a company from a data integrity, security, governance perspective, and anything else that comes to mind.
Would be more than happy to. So in terms of my role as CTO, I lead technology and technology strategy and innovation at Zoom. And I've been with the company a number of years, and it's been an interesting journey to that role. Some would say that working in the collaboration space is actually in my blood. My grandfather designed radio communication systems. My father was a professor of telecommunications and multimedia. And so I'm sort of following along those same lines, looking at how do we connect people around the world. In terms of my career journey, I started off working in the federal government, working in identity management, and how do we validate who people are in the online and physical world. That naturally transitioned me into how do we validate identity in different contexts, and got me into the fintech space and looking at how we do payments and make those more interactive and collaborative experiences. But naturally, I had to come back home to that sort of family core of going, how do we really help people collaborate? And I joined Zoom in 2015, initially in the support organization, rose up the ranks there, going to the head of support, and then transitioning in 2020 to that CTO role. And that was right in the middle of that growth that you mentioned. So, being there, I think there's a few things to look at when we talk about growth. And a lot of people look at the first side, which is just the pure metrics. I mean, as a company, we went from about 10 million daily meeting participants to over 300 million in a relatively short period of time. So naturally, scaling out infrastructure that quickly was critical. And that's where our hybrid approach of using co-located DC data centers that we operate, as well as cloud service providers, to distribute our load around the globe across all of that different infrastructure so that we could have a very simple to deploy infrastructure that was autonomous and therefore allowed us to scale and really focus on what enabled the platform to keep on running and enabled people to connect. But at the same time, that growth also meant focusing on our customers. Zoom was developed as an enterprise tool. And naturally, with the growth that occurred at that time, we started to have a lot of different customers come onto the platform with a whole range of different use cases. So simultaneously, while scaling, we were looking at how do we really address that user experience and the different needs of those user communities and really address what they needed and move into those different sort of options, whether it be a consumer, a family, or all the different business use cases. So that adopting, I think, really falls in line with our, talk today about what is this future of collaboration and work, especially as we start looking at the return to office.
Great. Amazing journey for sure. Thank you for sharing. That leads me to my next question, which is looking ahead, what is Zoom's perspective on the future of work? What will collaboration communication look like in the future? And can you perhaps speak to how Zoom is going to be enabling that? And where do you see opportunities? What are some of the challenges that we're going to be faced with? And if there are any industry-specific or implementation-specific use cases that you can speak to, that'd be wonderful.
Definitely. So both now and in the future, we believe employees should be able to work where and how they feel most happy, safe, and successful in serving, the customer base and growing the business. So at Zoom, we're preparing a hybrid approach to the future of work, strategically mixing innovative new technology that supports both remote and in-office workers. And the work model is going to look different at every company. It needs to suit, a company's unique business strategy, goals, history, culture, and the employee base. So it's complicated and there's a lot to figure out there, but really it's worth figuring out because that's so empowering. So, when we look at enabling that, we've always focused on being a customer-focused, grassroots organization, looking at what our different customers need and how we can help support their needs. We have a track record of swift innovation, and that has really been where we have done a deep dive to help look at how can we use cloud, how can we use a simple unified approach, be it mobile, desktop, where folks are to help allow them to collaborate and continue. So as we continue on this journey to help the world prepare for the future, Zoom is aggressively innovating to evolve from the killer app to the killer platform. We've designed our platform to integrate seamlessly with applications and work streams from all providers, whether they be related to task management, CRMs, cloud, security, all the different functions. It really is about, being a platform that integrates everything, be it video, phone, chat, rooms, events, and enabling teams wherever they are around the world. And, we are our own user of that. In our 10-year history, we have built ourselves on using our own tool and fully are behind that. And naturally, we've seen this be successful for ourselves and other companies. I mean, you spoke a little bit about adoption in that. And I look at what has happened in terms of adoption. I mean, half of the Fortune 500 are leveraging Zoom for collaboration. 7 out of the 10 top global pharmaceutical companies, 8 out of the 10 largest US healthcare systems. Naturally, global universities and school districts, not to mention 8 of the 10 largest retailers and over half the world's largest banks are all leveraging Zoom. So that approach is something that we've always really focused on to make sure that we're listening to those customers and how we can help meet their needs.
Wonderful. What major changes as a leader in the space do you foresee in the communication tech in the next 5 to 10 years, whether it's AR, VR, enhanced video collaboration tools? And what role in particular do you see AI playing in that?
It's a great question. And so I think one thing to sort of ground out in that is when we look at that future, you know, what will sort of be the rules of the road that we all have to sort of circle around? And we really believe that in the hybrid work model, we need to focus on solutions that promote trust, equity, and inclusion, that's mindful of health and safety, and is a frictionless experience powered by cutting edge tech. So, you know, AI, AR, and all of those play a critical role in helping deliver on that solution. Our vision is, how do we make collaboration frictionless, and can we make collaboration through platforms such as Zoom, you know, better than an in-person session because of what is empowered by all those different tools that are available there. We've had a strong investment in items such as AI in how it operates and runs our underlying platform. And folks see that every single day, from, you know, little things like the audio suppression in the background to virtual backgrounds. And that's just the beginning. I'm super excited because, you know, technology is evolving at such a pace right now. And I think about where human communication has evolved in terms of collaboration and instruction. And some of that evolution that we have seen in human communication, we are now seeing in our ability to communicate with technology so that it can adapt and we can interact with it in a stronger method and it can learn. And so I think as we continue to progress forward, there will be so many opportunities that open up through that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. As a follow-up to that, are there any examples that stand out that you would think from an adoption standpoint are perhaps that stuck with you?
Oh, there are so many fun use cases
Yeah.
that I've heard from adoption of our product over the last year. It's been amazing hearing the creativity and all the different use cases from, you know, folks being able to use the technology to, for example, in sort of a work context, use drones in combination with our platform to be able to have teams on the ground with oversight from above, being able to collaborate simultaneously with experts from afar. I look at folks in the entertainment space that have been fascinating, where they've used our platform to be able to continue their livelihood, especially in the time of the pandemic, where they've been able to do interactive games and sort of escape rooms on Zoom. Or what it's done to the shift in other roles. I think of folks that have used our platform, for example, in their manufacturing lines, and it's actually changed their business, where they've been able to put folks on the manufacturing floor that have a collaboration tool augmented in a wearable display that they have, for example, and using AR, they're able to pull in subject matter experts that might not even be in the same country or time zone to work in a collaborative manner, so that folks have that connection, are instantly able to phone an expert, and it leads to so much more productivity and connection and better operation and return for the business.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And what do you think are the key takeaways for businesses looking to embrace future of work, collaboration, communication, and if it is kind of even an option not to?
Well, I think you probably hit on the key point. I mean, From our perspective, in a very short time after the pandemic began, Zoom experienced a 30x growth in our daily meeting participants. And to us, this means the future of work is hybrid. With the best of in-person and the best of virtual communications coming together for maximum productivity and flexibility. From education to entertainment, from financial services to fitness, and from real estate to retail, and especially work, people want a hybrid system going forward. Following the pandemic, the future of work will look different. Leaders will need to continue to support, pandemic era models of doing business and help employees and customers build, an agile, lasting, and successful organization. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to returning to the office, and we're listening to our customers to understand their concerns and help guide our plans. As a technology platform built for humanity, and what's next, Zoom is committed to driving the democratization of communications as we empower the workforce of today and in the future.
Well, talking about the future, I feel metaverse is becoming kind of top of mind for a lot of companies. Have you thought about it at all, and how Zoom is going to be will be able to enable that technology and that world, if you will?
So the concept around the metaverse aligns very much with our goal of delivering, a better and more immersive experience than an in-person meeting. However, we think that people want to continue meeting face-to-face instead of two avatars in a business setting, regardless of the UI.
When we look at the future of collaboration and communication, where do you see the opportunity lies? And what are some of the challenges in bringing this future workplace to reality?
It's a great question. And there are many challenges to overcome. Companies will need to upskill their entire workforce in order to succeed in this hybrid world. The future isn't limited to what it looks like, but how work is done. And more importantly, how we collaborate. As humans, we communicate in many ways, in writing, verbally, non-verbally, and by listening and reading. So finding ways for technology to mimic these forms of communication, will help employees replicate the experience of being in the office with colleagues, but only better. Whether it's through new tools or new ways of using existing tools, technology is the solution for keeping this dynamic and rapidly evolving work as collaborative and inclusive as possible. So as a result, the entire workforce will require training on how to incorporate these tools in ways that increase collaboration and keep teams efficient, regardless of the employee's location. These opportunities to make remote communications better than in person is extremely exciting. The integration of new technology that provides a more seamless, more productive, and more continuous method of collaboration. And really, we see it as the expansion of visual communications to basically an entirely new use case. And, all of this will give business leaders the opportunity to reimagine, the in-office working environments with a focus on employee happiness, inclusivity, and productivity. And I think with that, flexible workforce, it empowers so many things and is going to empower the next generation of businesses and workflows.
Great. And what are some of the latest features or focus areas Zoom is looking into to bring this future to fruition?
It's a great question. And, we think Zoom offers a unique opportunity for customers to transition from typically siloed offerings to a consolidated, visually based platform that can form the core of their, future communication needs. Video underpins the platform, and the video reliability quality is the key experience differentiator. So we're looking at a range of features with platform, whether that's the unified, communication solution with, phone, chat, and conference rooms all integrated in one, or our developer platform, which really opens up this entire ecosystem to allow companies to build their line of business application side by side or embedded with this technology. So it's a seamless experience to transition between the collaboration and the work that's at hand. Naturally, events are going to continue and events are going to be reimagined, and excited for experiences like we have today. And so we are investing in that area. And naturally, businesses are going to, want to engage with their constituents, their customers, their vendors, and that full range. So having platforms such as our Video Engagement Center to allow them to connect and collaborate, we feel is so critical and so very exciting. I mean, customers don't just meet on Zoom. They create and grow businesses entirely on our platform. And we think this is just the beginning.
How does Zoom think about open innovation and kind of leveraging the external developer network, if you will?
It's one of the areas that we actually have taken pride in, the openness of our platform. We really believe in, fostering the sharing of ideas and collaboration. And that's not just for folks using the platform, but how we interact with others. So it's part of the reason that we have an open API to allow folks to, integrate with our backend systems. But we also offer SDKs, for example, to allow folks to embed Zoom within their solution. Or we even offer our raw video technology in our video SDK solution. So really, we can be a service to help empower their businesses. So, openness for developers is very important to us. And it's something that we continue to invest in to allow people to develop on the platform.
Wonderful. And then there's this question that a lot of large enterprises are faced with. What do you build internally versus who do you partner with? So how do you think of internal innovation versus leveraging the external ecosystem?
So I think when you're looking at that, build versus buy conversation, it's really holding true to what are your core values and the core technology that you bring, and that establishment of trust. A big part of our culture is really building connections and trust with our internal stakeholders, but also with our vendors and suppliers. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether it's internal or external. It is an experience that your employees, your customers, your vendors are going to have with your organization. So it's your name on the door. And really, that then goes into what is that experience? Do you have that relationship? If it is a buy, to deliver that amazing end-to-end, experience that connects people with your organization or brand? Or does it make sense that you have that core competency to deliver that amazing experience?
Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brendan. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much to Brendan and Shuchi for that awesome conversation. Next, we are so pleased to welcome Sunit Dwar, Product and Technology Chief Growth Officer of PwC US. And Sunit will be in conversation with our very own Carl Wiggers, staff writer at VentureBeat, to discuss workforce tech solutions that Sunit developed to help businesses identify skill gaps and invest in their own digital transformation. And remember, to receive notifications about the event, click that registration bell in the bottom left of your screen, that big red bell. So without further ado, please take it away, Carl and Sunit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to VentureBeat's panel on the future of work. I'm here with PwC's Sunit Dwar, where we'll be discussing technologies including the metaverse, conversational AI, essentially new and innovative platforms that are enabling this future of remote and hybrid work as the pandemic transforms the way that we do business. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the pertinent discussion topics here. Sunit, we're discussing the future of work, as I mentioned, and this encompasses a lot of different technologies, software, companies. To kick us off, why do you think it's important that companies prioritize digital transformation? Why is it key that they embrace the opportunities in some ways presented by the pandemic to, potentially expand their customer base in ways that weren't possible before?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. The interesting part about right now, there's two components to this. One is just the mindset component. One is having executive leadership, whether it's pre-pandemic now, hopefully post-pandemic, changing their mindset and truly, I wouldn't say they believed in the digital world, but they didn't understand what is a digital transformation because it was such a diluted word. And now what's happening is, as you just mentioned, metaverse and where we're going to go with this, automations will be sort of forgotten. They'll be in a whole different world in a couple years. But some of our executives and their mindset, they're so digital naive. And I think the first thing we need to do is get that mindset to saying, if you go down a digital transformation, you become digital citizens in your employee group, then you can start thinking about, right, what's the next benefit, right? Revenue, productivity, lower cost, better customer experience. And this is what we're seeing with our clients. And I'm having these conversations with C-suite members all the time saying the future of name that function, whether it's finance, HR, or marketing, there's a digital component to it, and you got to be able to embrace it. And to me, Kyle, that's the first thing we got to convince the mindset that the digital way is the way to go. And you don't stop there. You have to keep on going, right? Just like horse and carriage to a nice gas-powered car to the electric car. Like, we have to have that maturity.
Absolutely. So I want to mention, I'm senior tech correspondent at VentureBeat, and I write a lot about these topics. Sunit, I don't know if you agree. It seemed like early on in the pandemic, maybe circa 2020, digital transformation was something that was bandied about, a phrase that was talked about quite frequently. And it seemed like that's when the momentum started to pick up. Companies were embracing these technologies to ensure that they could continue business as it was, more or less, during the pandemic, to the extent that was possible. Now we're seeing the pandemic is perhaps going to last longer than some of us believed. With the emergence of new variants, is this presenting an opportunity to means that maybe missed that first wave of digital transformation? And for those that didn't, for those that were early adopters of some of these technologies, how is that going to affect them? Do you think it'll also lead to opportunities for them to further invest in some of these technologies and perhaps move even more of their business online?
Yeah, so I think the early adopters, just like us as a firm, we took 276,000 people through a digital journey. So when we went through the pandemic, we didn't let a single person go. We truly went, remote. And when we made the big statement as a firm that you don't have to come back, because we know we can operate in this digital world, right, with our clients. And when it was safe to come back, you come back. I think folks that adopted early are going to get ahead. But that doesn't mean that it's too late for the others not to adopt. And I think that's where I think some of the executives, and I'm working with a large financial company where they're going function by function, Kyle, and what we're telling them, at least you started. Starting now is just as important. And what's actually happening with these variants and this uncertainty, I think this uncertainty of, are we coming back? Are we not coming back? And what I call the new norm, you need to operate in a digital world. And what does that actually mean? So what that actually means is not just having better Wi-Fi or giving someone remote access from home. It's actually doing more automations, more work with less people, right? With less mundane work, less repetitive tasks. And how are you actually changing your operations, right, to account for that? Whether you're using RPA or robotics or other automations in your, what I call, ecosystem of your process, whether it's procure to pay, order to cash, or record to report, you have to start looking at those processes and saying, how do I automate those processes now? because we're not all going to be back together for a long time.
Right. So technology is one thing, but it's key to ensure that all these efforts remain human-led, right? That the human element isn't lost, and I think you just touched on that. Could you talk about your work with customers and clients focused around that idea, perhaps ensuring that these new technologies are leading to new growth opportunities and revenue opportunities, but not automating away the work of humans, for example. And perhaps you could also touch on upskilling opportunities on a related note that are enabled by these technologies.
Yeah.
The metaverse is obviously something top of mind for both of us, I'm sure. New ways for employees to learn new skills and engage in coaching and training. So I'm sure you have some examples.
Yeah, Kyle, let me give you a perfect example. I was on with a CEO of a large retailer yesterday, and their question to us was, we know we need to start, but how do we start? And in the past, CEOs and executives, they bought themselves out of the rut of skill shortage or getting new people. That doesn't exist, because there is a skill shortage, and there's a people shortage from a perspective of what do those future skills look like. So the good thing is, we just ran our CEO survey as a firm. 74% of the CEOs said that they're worried about their employee skill. That's a big deal. That goes back to now they're thinking about the mindset of their own people and their fiduciary responsibility to take care of those skills. So what does that actually mean? So let's peel it back a little bit further. Today's world, right? Today's skills are not going to be relevant in tomorrow's world. And what we don't want people doing is, if you have whatever function you have, the new future job requires different skills. We need to start teaching, to your point, upskilling, reskilling the current workforce to those future skills. And that's where I think a lot of this education tech or this digital learning is not hitting the mark, because what's happening, Kyle, is people are just throwing so much learning out there. It's like a pig's breakfast of learning, but what they're not putting out there is true applied learning to the job. How do you learn, Ben? When you're working on something that you are actually sticky with to your job. And this is when you and I talked about the metaverse. Think about in the metaverse how you can actually apply that learning and teaching someone in a different environment where you actually have hands-on learning. You can make all the mistakes without having any of the risks behind it. And you can do it from wherever and whenever. So I think that's going to be the new way of what I call lifelong learning through applied learning, which I'm happy CEOs are jumping on, but we got to get them going faster, right? And so my clients now, we have about 70 clients on our platform. We're really happy with that, because that's now showing, right? The post-pandemic, they're actually making the changes. They're actually choosing to saying, we have to take care of our people that are in the company, whether hiring a whole new set of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to talk about, there are incredible opportunities that are being brought about by these technologies, but I do want to talk about maybe some of the challenges that some companies have encountered in deploying or adopting, things like metaverse platforms, I should say, because the metaverse is still a somewhat nebulous term. So, in your work with customers, perhaps you can talk about some of the roadblocks and barriers that companies are facing, and maybe ways, that they're being overcome and creative and unique approaches.
Yeah, I would bucket it into sort of three things, Kyle. One is, if the CEOs and the C-suite are finally changing the mindset, middle management is far removed from that, because the middle management wants to do their same job what they used to do yesterday. So there's a disconnect there, and I think that push has to be more top down versus a bottom up swell. So that's one of the things that has to change, and there's a big challenge I see there. I have so many clients where the CFO has hired us, but then you get to the controller's office or the director of FP&A, like, we don't want to do this, but you have to, because this is the future. So that disconnect, we're working on it. There's a challenge there. The second challenge we see is this whole movement around citizen-led automation or citizen-led developers. This whole zero code, low code based, but that's a big counter to if I'm an IT organization, because IT organizations think, don't play in my environment. But the problem is the issues that we're dealing with right now are the issues, the process friction. These functional folks know better than anybody else. And the old school of IT is write a requirement, throw it over the wall, someone fixes it, you test it, you deploy it. That's months and months down the road. You can do an automation, overnight now, right? And so, again, these are small, what we call citizen-led versus business-led automations. And I think there's a balance, and I'm working with quite a bit of CIOs and trying to help them. And I just put a statement out there, a blog out there around, you have to be able to coexist together. And if you don't coexist, you can't get scale, right, from an organization. And I would say the third part is clients. Some of my clients are very skeptical, or they're not ready to buy the new technologies, such as RPA technology, automation technology, and they think it's just a fad. But it's not a fad, right? You're gonna need this to speed up production of your supply chain. You're going to need this to close your books faster, or you're going to have a very bloated cost, and you can't do that. And I think the faster they embrace that these technologies are here to stay, the quicker this IT and the business coexist, and middle management and CEOs actually get on the same page. I think we're going to have a real, true acceleration of scale across the enterprise.
Yeah, I agree. On the subject of fads, or things that might be perceived as fads, AI and machine learning, I think, falls into that category. For a number of years, it's been on the minds, or at least talked about among decision makers, but tangibly, it hasn't been clear what that actually means for all businesses, depending on the sector, the market. So, do you believe that, Suneet, AI is reaching maturity in some sense? Like, do you think the pandemic maybe help to accelerate that? Are companies using AI and machine learning in ways that are, supporting their business or leading to new, again, growth opportunities, and helping decision makers perhaps gain a better understanding of their business divisions and how teams are performing? Obviously when we talk about AI, the potential is endless, but I would love to hear about some specific case studies that illustrate maybe how it is or isn't reaching maturity finally.
Yeah, no, see, Kyle, the interesting is the hype that was put around AI and machine learning. It's the right hype, but the outcomes that people were expecting are not the outcomes that they're seeing on a daily basis. And let me give you an example, right? We as a firm, and we're working with a great client, a professional services company with this, is people still do reporting in books. They have QBRs in books and reams of paper and PowerPoints and however they want to do their sort of monthly reviews. One of the easiest things to do is take that data, do data wrangling, put it into a data visualization, and produce a dashboard, right? Whether it's on the mobile app or on your desktop. And so someone would say, well, that's not AI or a machine learning. Well, yes, the first time it's not. But when you put the engines around it, it's now learning. It's now learning some of the variances in your business. So my point is you got to start with the data. The sexy part is not gathering the data. Once that's all set and the engines start learning, then they start giving you outcomes so you don't fall in the ditch. So your supply chain is low. Here's what happened 4 months ago. Here's what's happening in the industry. Here's what's happening with your competitors. Here's how you should react and make a decision to. That's the difference of AI and machine learning. It's making you make better decisions. But if you don't set it up the right way, it doesn't matter. It's going to not give you what you want. Then you got to rely on what I call HI, which is not bad, human intelligence, but you're not using the power of the application, right? Or the power of the new disruptive technology. Hopefully that makes sense, because people get so confused that they want this big hype. The hype is there, but you have to set it up the right way, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's something I've seen in my reporting. Data quality issues seem to be widespread depending on the sector we're talking about. It seems, to your point, that often there's a misunderstanding there. There's a desire perhaps for adoption among, the C-suite, but they don't realize that data cleaning and prep is the bulk of the process often. So it's not exactly exciting, but to get to those goals with regard to AI, it's necessary. On a somewhat related note, I wanted to ask you, Suneet. We've been talking about a lot of technologies during this fireside, and you mentioned some of the thought processes involved with adopting these at an enterprise. What do you think it makes sense for companies to perhaps develop some of these technologies internally versus go to a vendor or a third party? Often it varies, on the size of the company and what they're trying to achieve. Something like AI is challenging in many cases, and you might need data science expertise to truly end up with a model that'll be useful to you. But how do you think companies should make that? How do you think that calculus should happen in the minds of an executive, for example? How should they arrive at the decision ultimately, depending on all of these factors that are involved?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Whether it's automations or it's learning or it's RPA or you name it, right? AI, machine learning. There are so many amazing companies that are out there that you can plug in into your ecosystem. The problem is you have to understand your ecosystem. You have to understand, right? Do you have a data lake that you can actually rely on with clean data? And by the way, it's not a one-time thing. It's a continual, right, data cleaning exercise all the time. That's one. If you can do that, that's fine. Two, it's truly the hybrid strategy. Even for us with a hybrid strategy, your own firm's infrastructure and process friction. Nobody else knows that. If you surround yourself, if you do like a hub and spoke, the hub is third party and the spokes are third party, you're gonna have a big mess in your hand, right? And what we've done in the firm is the hub is the core pieces that we've built, right? Our training and learning assets are controlled by us. We built by us because we know what our people want, right? And what we've bought on the spokes are the specific expertise, right? That we can't think that we can either do it ourselves or we like that niche part of it. And they're very specific to that. And I think that's where the trend has been going. We've seen a lot of success with that. And again, I wouldn't say it's a 50-50, Kyle. I think it's more of a 65-35, 65. You might want to buy, right? Because there's some really amazing technologies, but you got to keep the core friction because what you're trying to solve for is that process friction that the end user, whether it's your customer or your client, or your internal customer that's facing every single day. How are you making their life easier?
Right. Makes sense. Well, that's just about the time. There's plenty more to discuss. Obviously, we'll have a Q&A session after this fireside. But I want to thank everyone for joining us, including Suneet. It was a great discussion. Covered a lot. I'm sure we'll have more to touch on in the future. But without further ado, enjoy the rest of the sessions today at VentureBeat's Future of Work Summit, and hopefully see some of you in the Q&A. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, welcome everyone to the Q&A portion of my talk with Suneet Dua from PwC. We're discussing the future of work and all the technologies that entails. Without further ado, let's jump right into some of the questions that have been submitted so far. So Suneet, one person asks, how will post-pandemic workforce training be? Do you believe virtual is as effective as in-person? And I assume this person is referring to, VR training platforms and whether or not those are as effective as physical in-person training. Perhaps you have some research you can tell us about, or you work with clients to figure out and demonstrate whether in-person is in fact better than virtual in all cases.
Yeah, Kyle, and great question. So we've moved to this digital world of online training, but the problem is, as we move to it, the technology is there, but the content is not. And so what's happening now is we're working, and a lot of the ed tech providers are also working to build up the content that is what I call functional specific to the function and that is applied learning. What you don't want is you want to learn a topic and never use it on the job. So that's the biggest issue with learning. And so we're trying to remove that. To become a real lifelong learner, you actually have to apply the knowledge you're learning. And now I think if I step forward in this new AR, VR world, you get to start learning in a different way where you get to play with things and do things in a very safe environment, as we discussed before. In that safe environment, you get to actually learn more without that pressure. But it's all about doing, right, something to learn a new skill. We all have to go back to what I think is about lifelong learning again and embrace that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think we have time for about one more question. So I'm going to ask this next one, also submitted by Anonymous. What do you think will be the 3 most important skills 10 years from now? I mean, 10 years is a long time to predict out, but if you'd like to decide on a shorter time scale, that's fine too. But the gist is, what do you think workers, executives should focus on skills-wise in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I actually believe we all at one point or another would become software engineers or data scientists. So the skills around those, whether if you look at all the coder schools that are growing for the younger folks and how schools have adopted this, we're all going to become some sort of coding experts in some different language. So that's one. 2, I think quantum is something that's not fully vetted out yet, and we're going to need to have skills around what does that mean for our business? What does that mean for the future? And how does that run into the functions? And I think the third one that we haven't really talked about and is finally coming out is this whole aspect of AR, VR in the metaverse. And what does that actually mean? What does that actually mean? How do you transact? Is that a community? Is that healthy? Is it not healthy? But what do you do in that world? And how do you actually learn more as well as transact in a very different way? Companies are buying real estate in the metaverse right now. What does that even mean? So should you get ahead of that to look at, should you want real estate and what does that actually mean and what are you going to do with it? So those are the 3 things I would focus on. But I believe, Kyle, we're all going to become somewhat software engineers or data scientists with our major and minor in our name tag.
Absolutely. I'm glad you touched on both quantum and AR and VR in the metaverse. Quantum is finally reaching the point where we can maybe foresee it making a major impact, especially in industries like healthcare and finance. As for AR and VR, with the backing of companies like Meta and Microsoft, it's only a matter of time before, as you say, Sunit, I think enterprises embrace this in a major, tangible way. So with that, I think we'll wrap up the Q&A session. We're just about at time. I want to thank everyone for participating. Sorry we didn't get to every question. Also, thank you for watching the panel discussion leading up to this, the fireside chat. It was a pleasure again, Sunit. Thanks for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your Transform conference, everyone. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Excellent stuff. Really great session. Thank you, Sunit and Kyle. I'm very much looking forward to a quantum leap. And by that, I mean I'm looking forward to looking in a mirror and coming back as Robert Downey Jr. If you get that reference. You watch old TV shows like I do. So next up, we're going to have Clara Shai, CEO of Salesforce Service Cloud, in conversation with Jana Eggers, CEO of Neurologics, to discuss how AI-powered automation is transforming customer service. But before that, we're stopping for my favorite bit. If you've seen me do this before, you know a caffeine hit is coming. Please join the other attendees in the networking zone below. You'll click on that in the event portal, click on the networking. You'll go into Spatial Chat, which is one of my favorite tools that I've discovered during the pandemic and all these online events. You'll love it. You put in your details and then you can see yourself with your webcam, your microphone, but you can move around the room and you can move around and meet different groups of people. As you get closer to people, they get louder. As you move away, they quieten down until they disappear and you can move around to the next. It's like being an actual after party. So click that access link below, get in there, meet with your fellow attendees and discuss this morning's sessions. Remember, the first 30 people to enter and type in the chat, "I need coffee," will get a $10 Starbucks digital e-gift card. So we'll be back at 11:35 a.m. PT. If you're somewhere else in the world, it will tell you what time that is in your local time zone. And we'll go get caffeinated. I'll go get caffeinated. And we'll see you back real soon.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
The skills we have today are not necessarily the skills we need for the future.
How do people adopt new technology? How do we drive the productivity in a sustainable way?
Meet ProEdge, a revolution in digital upskilling that helps you stay ahead of the curve, which can empower your people to perform at the highest level, function, and learning level to innovate and drive efficiencies and transform your business with ProEdge.
The future of work isn't in buildings. The modern workplace is virtual, asynchronous, and global. Done right, it promises the best of both worlds, the relationships and camaraderie of the office with the flexibility and productivity of today's hybrid approach. The Aurea Future of Work Cloud creates connection by going beyond real-time communication and collaboration in a dedicated enterprise work platform. From today's moonshots to tomorrow's metaverse, the Aurea Future of Work Cloud makes the possibilities as boundless as your new campus. Join us in the future of work.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had a lot of fun in the networking zone. You got your caffeine hit, maybe some food, a little bit of rest, possibly. We're going to get straight on in our next session, as promised. We're very pleased to welcome Clara Shi, CEO of Salesforce Service Cloud, and Jana Eggers, CEO of Neuralogix, to discuss how Salesforce's AI-powered automation is transforming customer service. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Jana Eggers, CEO of Neuralogix, and I am delighted to be here today with Clara Shi, who's the CEO of Salesforce's Service Cloud. And we're going to talk about four huge topics, which are Salesforce, AI and automation, how that's transforming customer service, and what that means for the future of work. Claire, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to jump into that first question that always comes to people's mind when we talk about AI and automation and the future of work, which is jobs. And particularly what I love when we talked earlier and you shared some of the articles that you've written. I love your human-centered twist on automation, because we all think about automation as the robots being the forward part. And you really have this idea of robots helping and interacting and assisting the humans that are then assisting the customers. So why don't you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes when people talk about AI and automation and technology more broadly, it becomes a concern about, man versus machine, us versus them. When in fact, at its best, technology and AI and automation in particular, it's really about making each of us the best possible version of ourselves, right? I think about staying at a hotel and how we used to, before automation, we used to call the front desk and ask for a manual wake-up call, and how now all of us have the ability to automate that through our phones just by setting an alarm. Or, every time we do voice to text or we ask Siri or Alexa a question, it's just, we're using automation to free up our time to be our best selves. And so just to not lose sight of that as we're designing these experiences, and to not get overly caught up in the technology itself.
And what I love about your example of the wake-up call is, imagine being the person at the hotel that has to answer those calls and then type something in and set that up, or actually make the calls. That just wasn't an exciting job to have, was it? So you're talking about, let's take some of that things away that doesn't really use our skills as humans and bring more out that we're really good at. And I think you one of the articles that you wrote, and you talked about building deeper human relationships. And I'd love to know more about how Salesforce is helping companies really bring those human relationships and enhancing those human relationships out with automation.
Well, it's so true, right? And you have to think about it both from the perspective of the end customer and also the service or sales associate who's working with that customer. And before a lot of the more recent technologies that have been developed by Salesforce and others, there was a lot of manual question and answer, a lot of manual data entry, which again is not fulfilling meaningful work, and it's not a fulfilling, meaningful interaction. And so as we can offload more of these rote tasks to, say, a self-service portal or to a chatbot, it means that we're freeing our service associate and sales associates time to have deeper connection and to build that relationship and build trust with the customer.
So how do you think about that? How do you think about breaking down the replacing a human task versus augmenting a human task?
Yeah, it really goes back to how we approach AI at Salesforce. We have a three-pronged approach. We look at AI in, number one, for automation opportunities. So there's some tasks that, a human either doesn't have to do, it's not a good use of their time. It's the hotel manually calling each person to wake them up. They're really not adding much to that interaction, and just being able to automate that so that we can free the worker to focus on other things. The second prong is focused on assistance. So there is a human in the loop in that case. So when you call into a contact center and you want to talk to someone about your order, for example, instead of that person having to do everything from scratch, or instead of completely replacing that human interaction, we're giving in the moment AI assistance so that sales or service associate can be more accurate and helpful and more expedient in addressing the issue. And then the third prong is around optimization. And this is really my favorite because it's about continuous improvement and ongoing learning opportunities. So to take everything that's going on, everything that's happened in the interaction, for example, the chat transcript plus the voice call transcript, and be able to mine that for training opportunities or for opportunities to create self-service moments in the future so that both the individuals in the contact center as well as the company overall can continuously improve based on data.
So I can tell how excited you are about the optimization part. So I'd love to hear your favorite story about that, where people really did, your example of bringing together the audio conversations and maybe some of the text that someone had typed in before, how you bring those different data sets together to optimize how you're serving a customer.
It's really an exciting emerging area that's having an impact across every industry. I'll give you an example. Recently, we began working with a Fortune 500 insurance company here in the US. And they were having this problem, as many companies are across sectors, with not being able to hire enough service center staff. Right? We're in the midst of this great resignation, and the labor market's really tight. And so as a result of being continuously understaffed in their contact center, it was resulting in a bad customer experience because customers calling in, they'd have to wait on hold for sometimes over an hour just to get a simple question answered. And so we've partnered with them. We're using, we have a technology called Service Cloud Voice. So that's their telephony service. But rather than being the traditional old school phone system, we've taken voice and we've turned it into a digital channel. So just like we all have access to Alexa or Siri in our personal lives, we've given the equivalent of that power to these contact center associates. And so as the customer is talking, Service Cloud Voice transcribes the call. And instead of the service associate frantically typing and searching what the customer is saying, frantically doing manual data entry, we're capturing all of that automatically so that the associate can focus on connecting with the customer. Then we're taking that transcript and in real time, we're applying our Einstein AI to suggest next best actions and next best offers for the associate to talk to the client about. And this has been important because for the associates that they have been able to hire, a lot of them are new hires. And there's just a lot of edge cases and questions that come up that maybe new hires don't know how to answer, but they don't have to because the AI assistance in the moment is helping them. And then after the fact, we analyze every call that comes through. Instead of the old way, which was sampling 1 in 1,000 calls for quality control, we're able to listen with our optimization AI to every call to understand different patterns and take actions. And so the two most important actions we're doing is first, we're looking for really simple questions that customers are calling in about, which you can tell from the tone of their voice and the complexity of the request they don't want to be calling in for. For example, password reset or updating their mailing address, right? That is not a good reason to have to call in. It's not a good reason to wait on hold to talk to someone. It's also not a good use of the service associate's time and skill set. And so by uncovering these common call intents, we've been able to proactively guide this insurance company to say, wait a minute, maybe we should turn password reset and updating a mailing address into self-service processes going forward so that customers, the majority of customers who don't want to call in for those reasons, now they can just work with directly in the mobile app or on the website or deal with a bot to address those simple requests. And again, reduce the hold time for everyone else who does want to talk to an associate. The other thing and final thing that we've been able to do on the optimization front is for every service associate, we're able to create a personalized growth and development plan because we can learn through the transcript that, Jana, maybe you're perfectly trained up and you're just handling those calls without any issue. But if I'm a new associate and struggling with certain phone skills or certain types of customer situations, the AI can pinpoint exactly where I need help. And then I'm able to get that personalized training in just the areas where I need to get better.
There's so much to take from this, and I'm so excited. I can't decide which direction to go first. So the first thing I want to say, just because I've been working in AI for a long time, and one of the things that you talked about, I think, is so critical, which is you have a bunch of different technologies there. The first one of the layer is really being able to automate self-serve so that you can not have someone waiting, for example, to reset their password that can just be done very quickly and easily without any contact with a human. You have real-time support for the customer service agents so that Einstein is listening, for example, to their transcripts and pulling up things that they need so that they can fully focus on what the customer is saying, knowing that Einstein has their back. You have another layer, which is behind that, which is all about how do we optimize, for outside of those calls, and do better, build better products. I imagine even that you get from listening to your customer support calls, and then, like you said, you have this other layer of training your sales, and those are very different types of AI, and even each of them can have different types of AI. So I'd love for you to talk about how you break down those layers and help customers decide which one do I start first, and then go down the path of what the technologies are, because this is a very tech leaning crowd, and I know they'd love to hear more about which parts of Einstein help do which thing, and what you've learned from rolling those out with customers.
Such a good question. So I think it starts with what are the jobs to be done. And typically we see companies prioritize one of two ways. One set of companies, they say, look, we really want to focus on ROI impact. And we know that every customer support call costs us $15 or on average $20. And it's really not even about call deflection, it's about call avoidance. And so they really focus on the automation self-service use cases. I'd say maybe that's probably 60 to 70% of the time that's what we see. Others take an approach of saying, cost is important, but the most important to us is reducing and ideally eliminating customer friction. So where are the points in time where we detect the customer getting angry or they're hanging up? Let's start there and focus on where we can really make those moments better. And we'll deal with the cost part later. I mean, eventually we want to address both, but usually it's just more of an order of operations.
And can you tell us some about the technologies that go into each of those? What would people be hearing from vendors about what they could do? What should they listen for as they talk to what's needed to deploy those type of systems?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing right now, and of course, every enterprise will have a very complex and nuanced AI and machine learning stack. But the thing that I really like most about, and I'm so proud of what Salesforce has done, is really focusing on customer AI and looking at all of the data across the customer 360, whether it's sales, service, marketing, or commerce interactions, plus all the data that we get through MuleSoft and the integrations with third-party systems, to be able to really understand what's the full context of this customer. That this customer might be calling in right now about one particular issue she's having with one particular product. What's the bigger picture of what's going on with this customer that we know about? Maybe that morning, for example, she visited a marketing landing page for a completely different product. So all of a sudden it becomes a chance not only to resolve her current support issue for this product, but potentially once that's addressed, to talk about what else we can do for her to deepen that customer relationship. And so you think about different ways that AI manifests. Just to go back to the example that we were using earlier, first we've got AI doing the call transcription and happening in real time. That transcription is then feeding our Einstein next best actions. And next best actions is another really important category of AI decisioning from an assistance scenario. And then from there, right, we've got AI and automation where we can use our declarative builder to allow the company to create self-service workflows with just a few clicks, no coding required. It's also hard to hire coders these days. And then there's the AI that's used for coaching and training. And then at the end of the call, we have something called Einstein. Actually, in the middle of the call, we also have something called Einstein knowledge article recommendations. So sometimes it's not a next best action. It's just answering a question, a commonly asked question that a customer might have or a common issue. And so being able to suggest from the knowledge base. And then once the call is over, we have Einstein case classification. So instead of it's about removing, again, more manual work from the service associate instead of them having to manually type up notes and manually categorize that this call was about a life insurance policy that had lapsed and the customer wanting to reinstate it, we're able to take all of the data that we've just mined and analyze and be able to automatically classify that case much more accurately and much more quickly.
So again, I have several places that I want to go with what you answered, but I'm going to stick with the one where you talked as you described that flow and the different places, the different AI technologies that are being used in the different spaces. Sometimes you talked about automating a task so that the AI is going to do that task and a human is not going to be involved. And other times you talked about the AI complementing the human. And again, when it's doing the job, it's because it can do it better, meaning a human doesn't have to think about it, and it gives the human more bandwidth. I'm curious about, we often hear that with AI. AI will take care of the simple stuff so the human can take care of the complex. How do you help customers break that down? How do they think about which tasks are good for, the AI and automation, and which tasks are good for the human complemented with the AI?
That's also an excellent question that we get a lot. So there's some good rules of thumb that we've been able to guide our customers to follow. I mean, the first one is how much can a human add to the interaction. So I'll give you an example. Back in the insurance world, so when someone has a catastrophic event, right? We just whether it's a tornado or it's a fire or their house just burned down. We find that you really do want a human in the loop. It's not that the bot can't answer the question. It isn't that the bot doesn't know exactly every step. It's that in those moments, most people just want to talk to somebody who has empathy, someone who wants to hear them out, someone who can, establish an emotional connection, not just tell them in a very transactional way how they process their claim. And so the question of, what is the role of the human, if it's emotional or if it's an upsell scenario, right? So when someone has an opportunity, again, they're interested in a product, they're not just interested in solving their issue. You really want to put maybe your best salesperson on the line and route that call to that person. So that's the first one. I think the second one for automation is, how accurate, how confident do we feel that the AI has accurately assessed the situation? If we have a high degree of confidence and the human agent doesn't add very much, then it's a good candidate for automation. On the other hand, if we're not sure, right, because our data sources are a little iffy and we don't have a high degree of confidence, you really want to make sure, just put a human in the loop, just to, some human eyes can help quickly close the gap and address the accuracy issue. And so we see this a lot. For example, you think about the AI systems out there that help with recruiting, right? You don't want to completely offload that to automation, then you wouldn't need a recruiting team. But if you're getting thousands of resumes every day, AI can help you whittle down to a more manageable number, and also make sure that you're not introducing too much human bias into the selection process. And then from there, you hand off this more manageable number to your recruiting team to actually do the vetting. And so that's the example that I would use there.
Those are some great examples. So the other path that I wanted to go down, as you talked about, you brought up MuleSoft. And this is a big question that comes up is, where does the data live? Do I move it all around to a data warehouse? Do I have a data lake, and adjust it with the data warehouse, or do I just have a data lake? Or do I leave it in place? And MuleSoft is a great solution, particularly for that. So do you want to talk more about data and the questions and concerns people have with all the different places their data is and how much they can leverage it to help the AI?
Absolutely. And I think there's, fundamentally, first and foremost, if you think about it in terms of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? First, we have to make sure that the data is secure and compliant. And there's a growing number of places where we have data residency requirements. In healthcare, public sector, and financial services, we have an extra level of regulatory scrutiny around how data is stored and managed and who has access to it. And so addressing that first and foremost is really important. I think beyond that, it's around, AI access and whether you need the AI to decision based on data in real time. If you do, then it really creates a strong case to copy the data over at least into a centralized repository so that you can perform actions on it that, compute actions as quick as possible, right? If you're going to decision in the moment. If you're doing something more like the optimization use case after the fact, then doing more of a batch process. It doesn't have to be real time. It doesn't have to live there. You could actually just do it to run the calculation and then not actually store it there on a permanent basis.
So I think that goes back to your point about it depends on the job to be done. It's where that data needs to live. Okay, we're about out of time. And I saved the big pondering question for last, which is, where do you think this AI and automation is going to take us in the next, let's say 3 years, because who knows about 5 and 10 years out, but let's say in the next 3 years. In particular, you brought up a really good point about what's happening now with the Great Resignation. You brought up people wanting to help their employees upskill. How do you see this all playing out with AI and automation over those next 3 years? What do you think is the most exciting thing that's going to happen? And what do you think people need to be thinking about now in order to get to that exciting place?
I think AI and automation is, probably one of the defining technologies and developments in our lifetimes as it pertains to jobs. There certainly are going to continue to be a set of jobs, and it'll be a growing list as AI gets stronger with deep learning, neural networks, et cetera, where those jobs are going to continue to see them decline. And we've already seen that in a lot of clerical work, and we're starting to we see it in manufacturing jobs. On the horizon, right? We were seeing driverless car technology continue to improve exponentially. And so I think as not just business leaders, but as community and society leaders, we need to make sure that we get ahead of that and help provide the retraining that's necessary to provide continued employment opportunities to people in those sectors. I think for the other set of jobs that are not going to go away, the nature of those jobs are going to fundamentally change. And just like, we've had to learn 30 years ago, you didn't need to necessarily know how to type. You didn't necessarily need to know how to use Google Docs or word processing. You could rely on a secretary to do that. We're going to have to keep learning how to harness AI and machine learning and really embrace this lifelong learning, this attitude of lifelong learning in far more categories of jobs than ever before. And where we're going to have to double down is where the places for now that AI and technology aren't as strong, the emotional, the high touch, also, thinking about collaboration, right? I think about Salesforce buying Slack recently and just how powerful that's been to complement our automation workflows with now an ability to drive collaboration across departments and different teams within an organization, as well as with other organizations. For now, AI technologies are not as good as human beings at working with others. And so for us to all brush up our ability to build teams, to collaborate, to think critically and creatively, and to teach the next generations of workers to do the same.
Clara, I can't thank you enough for sharing all of this wisdom. I'll call out the job to be done and the focus that you said people need to think about there, particularly about where the human doesn't add anything with their humanness, where we can provide them more support, where we can help to optimize both them and for the customer. I think those are such important messages for AI. And I really want to thank you for sharing all that you're doing at Salesforce and your incredible background in this so that we can all learn, take that back, and deliver better for our customers. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Clara and Jada, for such an insightful conversation. In our next and our final session of the event, Scott F. Brighton, President and CEO of Araya Software, chats with Gerian Hamel, Vice President of Business Development at Deutsche Telekom, just down the road from me, actually, in Berlin. So they're going to talk about something most companies struggle with, which is creating a hybrid connection culture. So please, take it away.
Hi, my name is Scott Brighton, CEO of Auria. Auria is an enterprise software company that is focused on, among a few other things, providing software that helps large global enterprises adapt to and take advantage of all the changes being wrought by this thing people are calling the future of work. And I am delighted to be joined today by Gerion Hamel from Deutsche Telekom. Gerion, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Scott, for having me. Hi, my name is Gerion Hamel. I'm Vice President for Business Development within Deutsche Telekom's Customer Sales and Service unit. Those of you who don't know Deutsche Telekom, we are a fixed and mobile telephony provider in Germany, but present as well in Europe, as well in the US under the brand of T-Mobile.
Great. And so to start, Gerion, perhaps as a bit of context around this notion of creating culture and connection in this sort of new emerging hybrid work world we find ourselves in, what do you see as the most important changes in the nature of work that you, in your role as service innovation, are thinking about over the next few years?
So actually, we will talk. The Corona pandemic showed to many companies as well to us that people can work from almost anywhere at any time without a major decrease in effectiveness. And people in our company, as well probably as in many other companies, would like to continue working remotely, at least for a couple of days per week. So everyone is appreciating convening face-to-face, but the majority of work they expect to be done remotely. So at the same time, we don't know if this trend of positive of this effectiveness will persist, or if there will be a turning point and it will become less effective, or if there will be certain things you cannot do remotely and where you need where the whole remote and distributed work will suffer ultimately. So this is why we looked at how the future of work can look like for us in Deutsche Telekom to make it future-proof over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and Gerion, one of the things that you touched on there that we hear a lot from other customers is this sort of challenge of retaining organizational connection. So people have been more individually productive. I think there's a lot of data to support that sort of surprised everyone, right? As we went remote, people are more individually productive. But this notion of connections, people building their relationship networks, is just much easier to do when folks are physically together because of the spontaneous interactions you have that you're deprived of when you're remote. And there's this great study that Microsoft did. In fact, maybe we can even pull up the data. And they sourced this from activity that was happening on their product, Microsoft Teams. And what they found was that when the pandemic forced everyone remote, that the number of people everybody was interacting with on a regular basis went down a lot by an order of magnitude, right? I was interacting with dozens of people. Now I'm interacting with a few. People were, in effect, seeing their connections wither. And this was something that was particularly rough on younger employees that may not have even yet built their professional networks. And so we have all these tools like Zoom and Teams that enable us to communicate more effectively. And that was useful during the pandemic. But what the data shows is that what we lost was this sort of serendipitous interactions in the office end up being vitally important in enabling people to build and sustain connections. And so, Gerion, you recognized a version of this challenge with Deutsche Telekom customer service centers. Tell me a little bit about the service centers and the opportunity you saw to improve performance by enabling better connection.
So obviously, we spoke about the pandemic and the effect. At the same time, in our company, we are going through a transformation. And this is happening in our customer sales and service unit. And this customer sales and service unit consists out of 30,000 people. In most of them, almost 90% are sitting in Germany. But they're sitting in centralized units. So there is an organization for mobile telephony, one for fixed line, and maybe one for a technical help desk, and so forth. We started reorganizing all these different centralized units into 14 regions, so geographical regions, serving the customers across Germany in their region. Today, a colleague from fixed line is handing over a call he cannot solve to the national technical help desk. Let's make this example. In the future, he will solve the customer issue in his regional team straight away with colleagues from other units. Actually, with this kind of transformation, we go back to where we have been 10 years ago. So we were centralizing 10 years ago. But at the same time, we see a trend that customers expect companies to come closer to where they are. And in our case, it works pretty well. So we see that is as well a bit against the trend when we speak with other companies, especially in the telecommunication field. No one is going into this regional approach. But as I said, in our case, it works pretty well. Our customers love it. We have a variety of dialects in German, and customers appreciating if an agent can talk in his dialect with the agent. We can by creating these cross-functional teams, we can solve customer issues much faster, and especially if they are more complex. So that from that perspective, it's a great achievement so far. The challenge, though, is that we see that people who are now should work together as one are not sitting physically together because they are distributed across the country or maybe even across the region. And it's a natural behavior that you lose connection when you lose proximity. So the level of trust, engagement, and efficiency amongst the workforce is risking to decrease. And now let's come to the opportunity we see. We think that we should make them feel working as one team without sitting physically together. There where we're setting up this virtual office. For those who have never seen them, later you will see an image or a map how we are setting it up. It's a web-based application which represents a combination of all the distributed offices. Our agents log on in the morning, take their seat in their virtual office, and everyone sees who is there and can start collaborating through various tools or features.
So, Gary, on this notion of connection that you're describing, where we're trying to get people that are distributed all over Germany to kind of work more effectively together to solve customer problems. This sort of idea can sound on the surface a bit soft. Like, what is the business value of sort of creating these connections and sharing knowledge and building relationships? How did you guys think about the business impact of solving this problem amongst your service center people? What was the business case and metrics you used to measure achievement of it?
So the number one metrics for us is solving customer issues faster and more efficiently. So by having the proximity and knowing who is there, whom I can ask, is something which helps me as an agent to solve customer issues faster. So that's number one metric. Number two is the employee satisfaction. We strongly believe that we have agents who love doing their job, who have been enabled to do their job, can show a higher customer or employee satisfaction, which ultimately leads to customer satisfaction. So that's our number two metric, the employee satisfaction. Perspectively, so long term, it could be as well that we may think of reducing costs because we need less office space. But obviously, or honestly, it is nothing we built into our business case at the moment. It's something which may come which may come on top.
Makes sense. And so you and your team did this extensive evaluation of different technology options that could help you address this problem of connection. Kind of how do I create a virtual office environment? And I think at one point you even mentioned to me that your team looked at literally dozens of different tools. Can you share a bit about what you learned as your team sort of scoured the market looking for solutions for this?
Yeah, true. Once we developed this vision that something like a virtual office can catalyze the new normal and become a better normal, we looked at various technologies and as well tools. Technologies like XR, in our case, is not suitable. No one in a frontline role is wearing glasses for an entire day, especially not if at the same time you have to use a CRM tool on the computer and answer on the phone to customer calls. At the same time, there are great collaboration platforms from startups where we were lacking the full scope of use cases. We looked as well as at established tools like Microsoft Teams, which are great, but not giving us this sense of presence and proximity we believe in. So at the end, we looked at 3D tools, which are great, especially for event use cases, and 2D tools like Sococo.
Great. And, we're obviously thrilled you selected Sococo and that we're able to work with you on this great project. Why did you believe a virtual office software solution like Sococo might be the right answer to this rather than a traditional tool like the ones you mentioned, right? Teams or whatnot?
Well, we selected Sococo for a few reasons. Number one, the platform enables the use cases we need in customer service. And actually your team understood what we needed and started working on it straight away. This solution has, for us, sufficient maturity so that we don't need too much to invest too much into further development. And actually it fulfills as well our strict data regulation obligations we have in Germany. So that's it, Scott.
And Gary, on you and your team put a lot of emphasis on thinking through the right use cases, right? You have a virtual office, but what are people going to do in it? Can you share with us some of the more impactful use cases that you and your team developed?
So there's a variety of use cases. If you now look at the way how we implemented it, it looks a bit fancy because it's an island. So that the reason is that our people once in a while Germany has a coast, but they are the region where we are piloting doesn't have a coast. So they wanted to have an island. So that's why we were setting up in this way. So it was wanted by the people. And within this island or within this map, we have 4 functionalities which are very relevant for us. Number one is we believe that it makes a huge difference that you can see who is in the office. Once you're logged in, you can see who has taken a seat, who is available. So that's number one feature, seeing who is there and who is available. Number two is an implementation of a chat functionality with prioritization and routing within Teams. So if somebody has a question to a colleague, it will be routed through a chat to the next available agent. So that's number two. Number three is one-to-one video or text chats for simple requests for coaching, but as well for team meetings in one room. And last but not least, like in a real office, we believe in the power of coffee kitchen discussions. So we will implement as well a coffee roulette to let people interact and learn, get each other to know and socially interact.
Yeah, and I love that coffee roulette concept because it gets back to that creating those spontaneous interactions. One of the things you and I've talked about is where does this go over the long term. Sort of the concept of the metaverse, right, has gotten a lot of press lately. And in some ways, a virtual office is really just a two-dimensional business metaverse. And that one day, instead, we might be wearing virtual reality glasses that could create the impression that one was literally walking the halls of the office, even though you were at home. That it could become even indistinguishable from being there in person. As you think about where technology is headed, which is part of your job, kind of these innovation trends, how would you expect this program to evolve over the next few years?
So we have a similar belief. So even if it's at the moment a 2D virtual office, our vision is that it could become a virtual campus, however you want to call it, metaverse or not. But this is the direction we believe in, and we assume that all employees in our company may have a seat in this virtual campus wherever they are sitting. Is it in which building, which city, which home office, which country they are sitting? So, and prospectively, we need as well something like 3D elements to create a better feeling or joyfulness of the solution, and implement additional collaboration tools, be it, I just mentioned one like Miro or a flip chart. When you enter a room, that something immediately is available for the team to work on.
Yeah, no, agreed. And we've even talked about how for people that are physically in the office, they might get augmented reality experience that gives them some of the information and data that people that are working virtually might get. And so you can start actually integrating the in-office experience with the remote experience so that they're all connected together. I know you've got to run, but before I let you go, I wanted to ask you one last question. What advice would you give other executives that are struggling with this idea of how do I maintain connection and culture when everybody's distributed and some people are working from home and who might be thinking about the potential of setting up a virtual office?
Number one is that we never looked at it as a cost saving in first place. Long term, it may be, but we didn't start assuming that it should be the right direction, because you would lose people with this one if you started it with a cost saving project. Number two is that you should look at it as another MS Teams or Zoom or whatever. It comes complementary. So in our case, we even implemented Cisco WebEx into it. The beauty is that this sense of proximity is that this is there. Number three is focus on what people need, so the use cases they need, which is maybe quite obvious, but it's relevant. And last but not least, just do fast prototyping. Use something which is existing. In our case, ideally do it with Sococo. I would expect that you would recommend, and just test it. That's what we did as well.
Great. Well, Gary, I really appreciate your time today. We're super excited to be working on this program with you, and this is going to be a great year for Deutsche Telekom and Sococo.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Well, thanks, Scott, for that presentation. As you can see, Gary-on has departed us and is probably having a nice late dinner in Berlin, so I'm taking over to do your Q&A, if that's okay.
Perfectly fine, Haley.
Great. So we have some really interesting questions. I really like the first one. So the first one is, do you see the Sococo solution focused on connection and collaboration tools like Teams and Zoom? Do you see it as competitive or complementary?
Yeah, we see it as complementary because it's solving a bit of a different problem. So Teams, Zoom, this array of tools that we've all gotten comfortable using over the last 5 years, and in particular during the pandemic, are really about communication. And what the virtual office, what Sococo is trying to recreate, is this idea of presence. I'm there. I'm with other people. I can see what they're doing. I can engage in spontaneous interactions. And that might tee up communication that you would then use a communication tool for. You might have a video chat with someone. And in fact, Sococo integrates with many of those tools. But what we're really trying to create is this idea of we've lost presence, and presence is what enables this idea of connection and relationship building and walk the halls management and all of those things that have sort of dissipated as we've become isolated in our houses and on scheduled Zoom and WebEx meetings all day.
Yeah, great answer. I think everyone feels that, definitely. Okay, looking at the next question. What enterprise use cases and value do you see the virtual office you were describing there delivering to hybrid work?
I think there's a few basic ones. One is, who's around me and what are they doing? Who's busy? Whose door is open? Who can I walk in and have a quick chat with, right? All the things that you used to get when you were physically in the office, you get back, right? And so it sort of encourages that interaction that you sort of forget about when you're on all these, scheduled meetings. The second one would be bringing back the notion of sort of walk the halls management, walking around, checking in on people, right? Having these interactions. The third would be just having spontaneous conversations, right? Just popping into an office where you see a group of people having a conversation. That is in large part how relationships are built and cultivated in the office that we lose when we're remote. And then finally, there are obviously very specific use cases, such as the one that Garion talked about at Deutsche Telekom, where you can get people together and you can see who's around you. And that might lend itself to, oh, I'm having a problem with this customer. Let me raise my hand and see if somebody can help me resolve this problem with that customer. Those kinds of things now become possible when you can sort of see who's around you.
Yeah, you're bringing back the best part of office etiquette, right? But I didn't see a water cooler anywhere. I don't know if I missed that.
No, it's a great point. Part of what we're bringing to the virtual world is objects like that, the water cooler, right? Or the whiteboard, right? All the things that we have in the office that we're used to, these tools that are gone, we're going to bring back into the virtual office.
That's awesome. That's really great. All right, I've got a couple of other questions I want to make sure we cover. So this is a good one as well, because we've been talking about the metaverse in and out during the day. So how should I think about the virtual office as we're beginning to hear more and more about the metaverse?
Yeah, I think about the virtual office as sort of an early version of the metaverse, right? If you use gaming as an analogy, the current games, while there are some that people are playing on virtual headsets and whatnot, the predominant sort of metaverses, things like Roblox, right, are on a screen, right? They're not on virtual reality headsets. And I believe as the metaverse concepts get applied to the business world, we're going to see the same evolution. They'll start flat and two-dimensional, like Sococo, but then as technology evolves, those experiences will migrate to things like virtual reality and augmented reality headsets, and it'll become richer, right? But the concepts remain the same. And so we see Sococo, we see the virtual office as sort of version 1.0 of the metaverse.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. And bring on the lighter version of the VR headsets for working 9 to 5 or 12-hour days. The question that came up and people were wanting to get this answer, so I'll make sure we finish on this one, Scott, is how can I as a leader start to identify the areas within my business that could benefit from a digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a big question. And so I'll narrow the scope of it a little bit to the future of work. And as I think about what the big trends are with the future of work, I think of three things. I think of this virtual and hybrid work thing that we're all wrestling with. I think of globalization and the fact that companies are increasingly global. and I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how do you build an inclusive organization. My view is that in terms of digital transformation and thinking about how do I support my employees in this emerging future of work, those are the three programs that I would be working on. How do I create an environment that enables my remote and hybrid workers to feel as connected as my physical on-premise workers? How do I build a diverse and inclusive organization and use technology to help support that? And then how do I support a global workforce with different languages and different time zones, right? Those three things, I think, are a big part of where digital transformation needs to be making an impact for the future of work. And obviously with Sococo, we're very much focused on solving that hybrid and remote work problem.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, Scotland. This has been an amazing conversation, a great way to end the Future of Work Summit, talking about a really important topic, of course, culture, and we're all going through it and we're getting used to it. So appreciate your support and your time and your wonderful presentation. And we'll pass it back to Stuart and he'll give us his final closing remarks. But thank you again, Scott. It's been great.
Thanks, Haley. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to Scott, thanks to Gerion, and thanks to our very own Haley. That wraps up the sessions for the Future of Work Summit. Thank you to all of you for attending. We couldn't do this without you, of course. And thanks to our sponsors, Aurea Software, PwC, and MoveWorks for supporting this awesome event. Before you go, make sure to visit the VentureBeat Lab page, VB Lab, to learn more about how you can be the first to secure exclusive custom event sponsorships for upcoming VentureBeat events, and how you can feature your thought leadership on VentureBeat. And that networking zone right there, that's open until 1:30 p.m. Pacific. So for those of you who want to pop in there, move around the room between different groups of people, get to know each other and get to talk about what you've heard today and what challenges you have, what things you need. You might find your next suppliers or your next employees or colleagues in there. That's going to be open until 1:30 p.m. So do go in there and connect with your peers to discuss today's topics. And if you missed some of today's sessions, you'll see another little button down below there. You'll see that you can get them on demand. You can look at these anytime, and we invite you to do so. Of course, thank you to the whole VentureBeat team, everybody that's involved in putting this together, as well as you, as well as our sponsors. And I and we will look forward to seeing you again at the Data Summit, which is March 9th. We'll see you then. Thank you so much, everybody.